Cunningham of the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers for being here today. This is a U.S. Army Corps of Engineers reservoir that's co-managed along with Sonoma Water. In addition, I'd like to thank State Senator Mike McGuire and Assemblyman Jim Wood for being here with us today. These two are incredible leaders. They've demonstrated on fire and now on drought, and I appreciate their leadership. As you can see, a historic drought is here in Mendocino and Sonoma counties. The Russian River watershed has experienced extremely dry weather conditions over the past 2 years. The current drought on record is 1976-1977, and Governor Newsom was just describing experiencing that down in Marin County. Ukiah received just 16.2 inches of rainfall, and as of today, Ukiah has recorded only 12.24 inches of rainfall this year. And on average, Ukiah receives 37 inches a year. As a result of a lack of rain, our region's two primary reservoirs are historically low water storage levels. Lake Mendocino here is one of those reservoirs and is at about 43% capacity. With no additional rain and continued consumption from water users downstream, we anticipate the very real possibility of not being able to release water from this reservoir by fall. Thankfully, last year we were able to implement something called Forecast Informed Reservoir Operations, or FIRO, with partners including the Center for Western Weather and Water Extremes at UC San Diego's Scripps Institution of Oceanography. I'd like to acknowledge Dr. Marty Ralph, who heads up that institution, is doing some pioneering work here. It's true that FIRO saved 11,000 acre-feet of water in Lake Mendocino, 20% of this water capacity at this time, by implementing a deviation request from the Corps of Engineers that allowed the Corps to use forecast-informed reservoir operations and new decision support tools, helped funded by the state of California. This was a huge water supply reliability effort and the first of a kind in the nation. The development and implementation of FIRO was a direct result of the last drought that we faced in 2013-2014, and it was supported by the state of California, and in fact, I would place that the birthplace of FIRO was Lake Mendocino in that period of time, 2013-2014. So we're coming full circle, and we got to do more. The reality is, with climate change happening today, there will be more droughts, and we can't manage our water supply on a drought-by-drought basis. We need long-term, innovative, long-term solutions such as FIRO. I want to thank the partners for being here today, acknowledge the local community, the supervisors from Mendocino, the mayor of Ukiah, but in particular, I'd like to turn this over to our own Assemblyman Jim Wood.
Thank you, Grant, and thank you for being here today. We've known for quite a while now that we're well below expected rainfall throughout the state. In Mendocino, behind me, you can see what this looks like. The pictures of Lake Mendocino, Lake Pillsbury, and other areas around the state are verging on devastating. Right now, this lake is lower than it was 7 to 8 years ago at this time. I'm grateful our county supervisors here passed a resolution yesterday calling on a drought, basically declaring a drought situation here to protect our residents, our farmers, the ranchers, the vintners, and our local economy in general. Protecting our environment and the Russian River are at stake, and let us not forget we are approaching wildfire season, as we know from the fire that I saw coming over here this morning. I want to thank the governor for quick action on publish the executive order, which he's going to talk about a little later. These actions are critical to our ability for our agricultural operations to receive the financial assistance they're going to need throughout the process. You know, and as devastating as you see this ground here, this is also emblematic of what you're going to see with wells along the river, with farmers that are going to be trying to water their crops, with people who live along the river who are going to try to have water for their home, for potable water. This is just the tip of the iceberg here. So conservation moving forward, working with our partners at the state, with the Army Corps, and our local partners are absolutely critical. And I thank you for being here today. I want to turn this over to my partner in the legislature, Senator Mike McGuire.
Good morning. Thank you for allowing me to be here today. I want to take a moment to say thank you for Assemblymember Wood's tenacious leadership on behalf of the North Coast. We are grateful that the governor is here in Mendocino County today. We want to recognize four Mendocino County supervisors, the home district supervisors, Supervisor McGordy, we have Supervisor Williams, Supervisor Mulhern, and of course Supervisor Haschak from the Mendocino County Board, as well as Mayor Orozco from the city of Ukiah. Lake Mendocino is the canary in the coal mine when it comes to California's drought. The alarm is sounding, and it couldn't be louder. What you see around us on why the governor brought us here, it's part of our immediate future, not just for the North Coast, but throughout the Golden State. And working with the governor, we must take immediate action, not just for those who are in rural, vulnerable communities, but also for endangered species, as well as those who are part of our agricultural community. We need to mobilize to help the Golden State's hardworking farmers and ranchers and farm workers, along with businesses and endangered species that will be impacted by reduced stream flows due to the drought. And let's be candid, while California's climate has always been variable, the last couple of decades has seen some of the hottest on record here in the Golden State. We know that the climate crisis is making droughts here in California even more intense. And luckily, the Golden State is in a unique position to move with speed to respond to this latest crisis. We're gearing up for a hell of a fire season, which will be made worse by record low moisture levels in our forests and wildlands due to this drought. Working hand in hand with Governor Newsom, $536 million is now moving into communities in every corner of this state focused on expanding fire prevention, preparedness, and response. And this early budget action will put more boots on the ground, more engines on the fire line, and allow the state to be able to focus on thousands of acres of more forest that will be managed to become more fire resilient. And we're also moving with speed in partnership with the governor to help this state respond to the drought, to counter what we see here on the North Coast and what we know is coming this summer and fall for the rest of California. We're going to be working with Governor Newsom in the Assembly. The Senate is led by Senate President Atkins, that will be focusing on a $2 billion plus budget package that will be laser focused on drought response for smaller, lower income communities, for homeowners that want to transition from lawns to drought resilient landscaping, for farmers and ranchers, and of course to cities and counties and water agencies that need to be more focused on water quality, endangered species protection, as well as water recycling. Finally, there is no other governor. There has been no other governor that has been faced with a number of crises than what Governor Newsom has been having to stare down over his first 2 years in office. He's been faced with catastrophic wildfires. He's been faced with power shutoffs, a global pandemic, and now this drought. And I think we need to be honest here on the North Coast. He's been active, he's been engaged, and he's been delivering for us every step of the way, especially in rural California. He's been helping us lead through our darkest days, and we're honored that he's here today in Mendocino County. Governor Gavin Newsom.
Thank you, Senator Grant. Thank you, Assemblymember Wood, Dr. Wood, and Mr. Mayor, thank you for being here. Members of the Board of Supervisors, very grateful, honored to be here, that you're here as well, and to our dream team, which I'll introduce to you in a moment, as I refer to them, of experts and historians, as well as practitioners on all things water policy and drought, representing various agencies in the state. I'm standing currently 40 feet underwater, or should be standing 40 feet underwater, save for this rather historic moment. And we say historic oftentimes we overstate the word historic, but this is indeed an historic moment, certainly historic for this particular lake, Mendocino, which is at 43% of its capacity at this time of year. This is without precedent. Accordingly, Lake Sonoma nearby is at 62%, also without precedent, all part of this Russian River watershed, all part of a system, a water system that includes over 7,700 components, many parts, as we say, one body, state, federal, local, regional, a dynamic system that's been built up over the last century or so, more formally over the course of the last half century plus. We recognize the world that persisted, the world that existed a century or so ago, no longer persists and exists today. The hots are getting hotter, the dries are getting drier. We talked to Representative from Scripps about atmospheric rivers, a reminder that the wets are getting wetter. And as a consequence, we need to disenthrall ourselves with the old ways of managing water supply and distribution. We need to think, act with a sense of urgency, think differently, and approach the challenges with a laser-like recognition that you can't focus this state as a one-size-fits-all solution, meaning we have to target our solutions regionally. Truly, parts of the state are in extreme conditions like this. Other parts of our state are not experiencing the kind of extreme conditions that we're experiencing here in Northern California. As a consequence, we'll be signing an executive order today that spells that out. More of an iterative framework, a framework that recognizes unique characteristics that persist and exist in different parts of the state of California. Now, what's occurring here in the state of California is not necessarily unique to the state of California. The drought conditions persist across the west coast of the United States. By estimates just a few weeks ago, 77% of the west coast of the United States is in what is referred to as a mega drought. Recently, there's been emergency proclamations, declarations, and emergency preparations that have been extended by governors all up and down the west coast of the United States. Places like Iowa, not just our neighboring states to the north like Oregon, states like Texas, states like North Dakota that are struggling through extreme drought conditions as well. In many ways, California is doing a little bit better than some of the other Western states. And I don't say that lightly. I say that quite specifically. We have a Western States Collaborative that was established through this pandemic, and we're engaging in a consistent basis, not only exchanging best practices and ideas to address the issues of COVID, but also now beginning to transition those conversations on sharing best practices as it relates to droughts and managing under these difficult and challenging environments. We're year 2 into this drought. I want to put that in perspective. It was year 2 that then Governor Jerry Brown in 2013 in May announced a similar action to the action that I'm taking. That was the second year of what became a 5-year drought in the state of California, 2012 to 2016. We've barely been out of those drought conditions, and here we are entering back into these drought conditions. As the governor did in 2013, we'll be organizing a similar strategy on the basis of his experience and the experience of the team that was also representing the Brown administration during that last drought, that is here advising us on this drought in their formal roles in various departments. We'll be advancing a executive order today around drought preparation, and we will be declaring in a targeted manner a drought emergency here in Mendocino County and in Sonoma counties. We have an emergency declaration, an emergency order that allows us to build, an executive order that allows us to build in an iterative manner as conditions persist and present themselves to add other counties to that list as necessary. But we are taking a sequential approach, we're taking a targeted approach, and we're taking an approach based upon actual conditions on the ground. Again, California, many parts, one body, not just the water system. And we have to recognize the distinctive issues that persist in various parts of the state of California. This action follows a series of actions the state has been taking over the course of the last many, many months. In November of last year, we dusted off our drought task force. We organized and convened an internal team represented by the folks you see on your left, on my right, that began the process of looking at strategies as it relates to easing our regulatory framework, making available strategies and techniques to address in real time the changing conditions that were anticipated, even as far back as November, in the beginning of the rainy season, that would lead us here today. We also did not hesitate going back over a year, to put out a new vision for water management. I identified a problem, but we also identified over 100 specific actionable strategies and solutions to address the needs of a changing environment, address the needs that we need to advance as it relates to climate change. We put out a new water portfolio strategy, a new vision for water management in the state of California. Hundreds and hundreds of hours of work, regional, state, federal partners, as well as private, as well as philanthropic support. We put that water portfolio strategy out. We put it out for public review. We got an enormous amount of input, and we formalized our drought with an official report that was put out a number of months ago. I encourage people to take a look at that report, those that are looking for concrete strategies and solutions on issues from groundwater replenishment to conjunctive use to issues of storage in all its forms in manifestations, above ground and below ground, water recycling, toilet to tap strategies, issues around efficiency and conservation, and new flex strategies that are incorporated, many of those ideas and principles, in the emergency proclamation that we are putting out today in this executive action that we are putting out today, mindful of the environment, watersheds, ecology, natural resources, as well as mindful of human condition, as well as economic conditions for farmers and ranchers, for growers of all types. And so that comprehensive strategy is set the tone for us, a strategy that architects our future-facing efforts. That strategy has also been financed, and this is important to note. Because of leadership, the two members of the legislature, leadership of the team that is here assembled, and the people of the state of California, a bond was passed a number of years ago. $7.3 billion has been appropriated. $7.3 billion since the last drought has been appropriated for the all of the above strategy, including, by the way, $2.5 billion on 7 large storage projects in the state. In total, those storage projects that have been financed, or at least with $2.5 billion of appropriation, have an equivalent in the aggregate storage capacity of Lake Oroville at capacity. And I'm mindful of that because I'm mindful of the rhetoric when it comes to droughts and the ideology that shapes opinions around droughts. We are not ideological about our approach. We're very pragmatic about our approach. And that's why I reference and reinforce the $2.5 billion that was set aside for storage projects, including a site not far away from here, sites, an above-ground storage facility that's off stream that is well underway, still in need of further financial support. As was noted by the senator, financial support is not just limited to the $7.3 billion that's already been appropriated over the course of the last number of years. We will be substantially increasing our financial support to address the needs of the drought and communities' needs, including safe drinking water, access to reliable, safe, affordable drinking water for small and rural communities, as well as underserved communities. We'll be advancing more support in those efforts to build on what the Senate recently put out, to build on what the Assembly likely will put out in the next number of days. I can assure you in my May revise, which is just a few weeks away, we will be putting substantial resources to continue to advance the cause of making the capital improvements that are necessary to prepare for a resilient future. Droughts are not unique to California, quite the contrary. You cannot go back to a state of the state of any previous governor and not have a state of the state include substantially issues related to droughts and forest fires. It's by no means unique or distinctive, quite the contrary. It's part of this Mediterranean state that we live in. It's a big part of why California is as beautiful and spectacular a state as it is. What is different now is the extremes. What's different now is the climate-induced impacts of these droughts. And that's what we need to hit head on. We need to deal with the underlying issues related to climate change. This is, after all, Climate Week, and no state in America has taken more aggressive and progressive and sustained leadership as it relates to low-carbon green growth and changing the way we produce energy than the state of California. So we're mindful of that in the medium and short run and our responsibility to set the pace for the rest of the country, and for that matter, in the absence of what we've experienced the last 4 years, even international leadership. But we also are mindful of the situational responsibilities to do more and do better and provide flexibility so that we can meet the needs of 40 million Californians and not pit rural versus urban, not pit north versus south, region to region. This is California. We are Californians. And we won't play into that frame. I, at least, as long as I'm here, won't play into that frame. To me, those are the old binaries. And we got to get out of that mindset. That's why we're pursuing voluntary agreements in this state. Won't bore you with what that is, but it's important. I want to end these water wars. We're working very closely with the Biden administration to do just that. That's why we're working collaboratively now, not lawsuits, not closed fists, but open hands with the Biden administration, including Secretary Vilsack, who we were on conference call with a week or so ago, including the Interior Secretary, multiple conversations over the course of the last number of weeks to work on these partnerships anew and address some of these old lawsuits and these old binaries that continue to persist in our state. So we're in a remarkable moment. We're experiencing drought conditions throughout the vast majority of state. Today, we are advancing a drought emergency declaration in 2 counties in the state. We have the ability to flex up in real time based upon an iterative mindset and a focus to deal with changing conditions as they take shape. The other actions in this very long executive order allow for the team here from Fish and Game, Department of Water Resources, our state agencies from Food and Ag, as well as Natural Resource Agency and the leaders that are assembled here. Allow them more flexibility, more planning, more resources, and more of a resourceful mindset in terms of engagement and collaboration. Recently, and I'll close, recently we also did something else. Interestingly, didn't get a lot of attention, but I think deserves some attention. We put out lessons learned from the 2012-2016 experience. No greater experience than having lived through something. It's not intellectual, it's very practical. Just ask the supervisors and the mayor up here and residents of this county. And so we incorporated 6 key lessons learned into a document that we put out. I'd encourage people as well to take a look at that document around efficiency, around all Californians are in this together, and we all have a responsibility and a role to play to reduce water consumption. It incorporated lessons learned on small water systems that are vulnerable in droughts and the consolidation since then of 150 small water systems. It incorporated the imperative and importance of the Safe Drinking Water Act that we passed in 2019 to allow for $130 million to invest in reliable and safe drinking systems all up and down the state of California. Those are tools in the toolkit we didn't have going into the last drought. And I'll just end on this because it's important. By the way, there are no sound bites with droughts, nor with climate change. No, this is serious stuff. The important point is to reinforce at this moment is that Californians have a sustainable mindset. I couldn't be more proud of this state. We are currently utilizing 16% less water, our urban users, than we were prior to the last drought. It peaked about 25%, but people have kept that mindset, and they've continued to do good work. And so I want to conclude by thanking the people of the state of California for not taking their eye off the ball, for their commitment, not just passing interest, to address the issue of sustainability and particularly the issues related to drought and water security. There's no mandates today on water consumption. There's just the encouragement and now more support and resources for those efforts to continue and scale, and the opportunity for our leaders here, Grant and others, in partnership with local and regional leaders, to have the flexibility to meet the needs of this acute circumstance here in Mendocino and Sonoma counties. With that, let me just sign this and then ask if you have any questions, and then invite a team of folks to help answer any of those questions, particularly on the basis of the extraordinarily talented group that we have here assembled. I will spare you, this is 8 pages or so of reading through all the details, though I did, I hope, cover most of them. So this executive order will go out and officially be stamped later this afternoon. Again, I'm very grateful to Senator Wood and to Senator McGuire in particular, who've been incredible leaders on drought and water resiliency issues, as well as wildfires. And forgive me, I'd be remiss. We have a 200-acre wildfire occurring where green grass is. We now have, year to date, experienced 2 times as many wildfires and twice as much acreage burned than we have averaged over the course of the last 5 years. Go to South Anderson Valley, if you don't believe me, 50% contain those 200 acres. But you'll see that there's dry brush underneath that green grass already in April. And so I appreciate the Senator referencing the work we all did together, that $536 million for early action on wildfire preparedness, vegetation management, forest management, and also looking at home hardening and strategies and programs to pre-position assets, including an additional $80 million to hire 1,399 firefighters, 1,400 firefighters. We will take more action in the next number of weeks with the traditional budget. I can assure you, wildfires, not just droughts, top of our agenda. We were recently in Butte County talking about that, and in Fresno County as well. All of these things come together and obviously create the imperative of meeting this moment with this action, the first of what I anticipate will be many similar actions over the course of the next months and years. With that, happy to answer any questions.
Hi, Governor. Jeffrey Schaub, KCBS. So my question is, I'm told that it's probably likely that by the very beginning of the summer you will have to declare a statewide drought emergency. Do you envision having to do that?
Well, I don't envision anything in the abstract, but we plan for everything very prescriptively and strategically. We've been planning for this action for some time. And as I noted just a moment ago, we'll have a capacity in real time to be iterative. I anticipate being strategic and targeted in terms of the formal emergency declarations as needed. We won't wait. We'll be strategic based upon conditions as they take place. As it relates to statewide order, we have certainly gamed that out, but right now we're not prepared to advance a statewide order.
Hi, Governor. Wayne Friedman, ABC 7 News. 2 questions, please. First, what was it that stood out about Mendocino and Sonoma counties? That's the first question. The second question is, you said you don't expect any mandates, but the situation you say is bad. So what would prompt such mandates?
Well, again, I want to just compliment the people of the state of California. Again, 16% reduction in water use compared to last drought at this time, meaning the people of the state of California have done so much more to be more efficient and to have a conservation mindset. And so I want to continue to encourage that and provide more support on that basis. We traditionally, and the cadence you've seen in the past, and that's why I referenced a little bit of the history of 2013, which was the second year of that 5-year drought. You may recall it wasn't a year later that Governor Brown formalized those mandates and formalized those conservation efforts. That tends to happen in a third year of a drought. This is more dynamic, and this is certainly more acute to your question around Mendocino and Sonoma, and the acuity of experiencing particularly one single watershed and the impact of having historic low reservoir, 43% here, required this urgent action. And I am mindful that 50% capacity, plus or minus, is what we're looking at in the aggregate in large reservoirs all up and down the state. But in certain parts of the state, conditions are more favorable at the moment than they are here. And so we took the actions here because of the imperative of this particular moment.
Are you implying that these are the worst 2 counties in the state of California?
I think when one does that, invariably members that represent districts in other parts of the state cry foul. So I will only acknowledge this, that we are experiencing drought conditions all up and down the state of California and extreme drought conditions all across the west coast of the United States. And as I've made clear, and I'll repeat it to reinforce the message, we're not ideological about this. We will accommodate needs as we determine, and we determine on the basis of facts on the ground, and we continue to work very collaboratively with our partners in the Central Valley. Again, I was just there last week in Fresno County, Northern California, and certainly our friends and partners in Southern California.
Hi, Mary Callahan. I'm with the Press Democrat newspaper. So I cover this region, and we've been through this last drought. We have a very small reservoir here that has an impact on the northern part of this region. And during the last multi-year drought, there was a lot of discussion about learning from the fact that we are now experiencing extended droughts. And I'm wondering if the current declaration does not include mandates and you don't anticipate mandates, how that helps deal with the current acute situation, given what we've learned about the past years, that we may have several more years without rain.
Yeah. So we don't anticipate mandates. Let me make sure we're clear on this. I am very clear that we're gaming out everything. I want you to be clear that we are gaming everything out. I'm not prepared to announce those now, just weeks out of our April 1st snowpack survey in the second year of drought conditions in the state. We are prepared and have certainly advanced a declaration here today of preparedness about a month earlier than Governor Brown did during that 5-year drought at a similar time. And by the way, with even more acuity, you recall at the time they were 17% snowpack when Governor Brown announced that preparation order. And so I want to remind you, the emergency declaration is one component of this executive order, but there is an executive order that includes pages of requirements for preparation for the team that includes the entire state of California. I want to make sure people understand that distinction. As it relates to making determinations and decisions around mandates, we will make them as we see necessary. Specific, though, to your question, having covered this community in this region, I'm going to take advantage of the folks that were here in 13, 14, 15, 16, including the spokesperson for the Brown administration, Wade Crowfoot, who's head of our Natural Resource Agency that's leading our task force on drought, to talk more specifically about what this means, this executive action and the emergency declaration for your county, and why it's very, very meaningful for the residents, businesses, and the community broadly in this area.
Thank you, Governor. Wade Crowfoot, California Natural Resources Agency. Since last October, many of our colleagues here today and several agencies across our state have been monitoring conditions over the winter to really understand, obviously, levels of rain and snow and what it means to our water supplies in the state. We recognize that, obviously, coming out of the winter, we are in our second straight dry year of very dry conditions. That is having impacts differently in different parts of the state. Here in the Russian River watershed, communities and the water agencies are experiencing a fairly unique circumstance. The Russian River watershed is geographically isolated from our larger water systems in the state in the Sacramento and San Joaquin valleys with our state and federal project. So the Russian River watershed really relies on precipitation falling in this watershed. Here in these counties, you have one of the most forward-leaning, most proactive water agencies in the entire state that has done more to expand conservation and build flexibility of the system. But even so, this climate change-driven drought means that there is a concerning level of water supply here in Lake Mendocino and further down the system in Lake Sonoma. So the targeted emergency proclamation today will give our state agencies the tools needed to take fairly drastic actions to preserve water for the use of communities and for health and safety purposes. And specifically, our State Water Resources Control Board has the potential through this executive order to potentially curtail water rights that would normally be legally entitled water users to divert from the system. That's an important power that needs to be used very judiciously. My colleague Joaquin Esquivel is here, and I think I might ask him to come up, and I think we both share that we bring those tools through the emergency proclamation that the governor's issued to this region with a sense of partnership with local water agencies. While the state now has certain emergency powers, our anticipation is that we will use them in partnership with local communities and the local water agencies to understand what actions need to be taken to preserve water in this system. The governor pointed out we are in the second year of the drought. The last drought lasted 5 years. The so-called millennial drought in parts of Australia lasted 12 years. So the action we take today is really preparatory for anticipating these evolving conditions. And what it allows for is for our state agencies to move very nimbly with local water agencies to take whatever actions are necessary in coming weeks and months to protect water for communities in this region. And with that, I'd ask Joaquin Esquivel, the chair of our State Water Resources Control Board, to elaborate.
Thank you.
Thank you, Wade. I appreciate that. It is not an easy thing that we're all having to manage through. Drought, again, is very frequently on the mind of Californians, and we've gone through droughts previously. So looking back at the last drought, the board had to take drastic actions in order to curtail water rights users, but also to modify some of the projects that are run in our watersheds in order to really focus on human health and safety flows. And so, as Wade said, those are some of the authorities that we'll be having now in an emergency fashion to allow us to move quickly. I think it's important to remember that it's Mother Nature herself that is curtailing us, and that it's really incumbent upon all of us, and is why you hear a real focus on local leadership to assess, understand, and manage these really dry conditions, particularly when it comes to individuals diverting from the rivers. It's going to be really critical that we all ensure that we have the best technical information, both on the evolving hydrology in our watersheds, but also information about those water rights holders that are taking water from the system, and again, at this point, very obviously don't have enough to meet everyone's demand. And so we will have a very, locally driven process and focus, but if conditions continue to find themselves so extreme and we still haven't found that voluntary solution, as we say, on the local watershed to balance out these needs, we need to take quick action. And so that will allow us to do just that. I would also just say the other provision in the emergency part is around procurement, so allowing us to quickly, on the drinking water side, buy equipment or other resources that we may need as it relates to, again, human health and safety and the needs of communities in this really crisis. And I'll hand it back to the governor.
Well, you can stay up there. By the way, Joaquin has been one of the just extraordinary leader on making sure that we're really supporting community. We have 1 million people that don't have access to safe, reliable, affordable drinking water, which is an extraordinary statement in a state as well resourced, the state of California. But what we do have now is a strategy, a plan, leadership, and money, because the leadership of the Assembly and Senate, as well as his leadership, on an annual basis to address that with the kind of acuity of concern that's deserved. Forgive me.
Hi, Governor Newsom. Adrian Bauman for the Mendocino Voice, local newspaper. Lake Mendocino here is fed by the Russian River, which in turn is fed partially by water coming from Lake Pillsbury and Scott Dam up there. I know that that's currently in the process of being reauthorized through FERC, which is a federal agency. But I'm wondering if the state has any opinions about, because there's been a lot of debate locally about whether Scott Dam should stay up or be taken down to facilitate salmon. And so if you have any opinion, or if anybody,
I'm going to defer to the my brain trust here
about whether
so
or not
I don't
to keep
get ahead
Scott
of my
Dam up.
skis, on that specific issue.
Yeah, I'm asking about keeping Scott Dam up or taking it down.
Yeah, I mean, I don't have a specific answer to your direct question of whether the state does not have a formal position on that question around the dam. I will make a couple important points that I think are relevant. The first is, as the governor explained, our water resilience, our drought resilience in California will be achieved regionally. So drought resilience in this region looks very different than drought resilience in Sacramento or the Bay Area or Southern California or the Central Valley. So on these questions around surface water supply, groundwater supply, dams, we really look to partnership with regional authorities, the counties, local communities, local groups to help us inform of the direction. Second point is we're obviously balancing the use of our rivers for the water supply that supports 40 million Californians and the 5th largest economy in the world, and also allows for the preservation of salmon that have been returning to California's rivers for 10,000 years. And that's obviously sometimes a challenging balance when there are water shortages, but it's a balance we're committed to maintaining. So you'll see our Department of Fish and Wildlife, for example, be very active during this drought period, monitoring very closely the health of these various populations, salmon, steelhead, fish, and terrestrial wildlife, and taking emergency quick action to protect those animals.
Thank you. I also just wanted to clarify, in terms of the executive order offering specific curtailments, does that apply to pre-1914 rights as well?
Yes, it does. Apologies. It does entail those authorities. The suspension of the water codes that are in the emergency proclamation allow us to more easily curtail than pre-1914 and riparian water rights holders, which are, as you know, for those that follow, some of the principal challenges we had in the last drought. So.
Go ahead. No, we're good. And I'm going to introduce Carla in a second, because I want to take advantage of some of you that still may be paying attention, talk about State Water Project. And for that matter, we talk about CVP, but let's start with the state. Forgive me. Please.
Sarah Reith with KZYX. I think my next question is probably also for Mr. Escoval.
Oh, good.
I cover the Board of Supervisors, which is currently in the midst of overhauling the cannabis ordinance, including the code enforcement provisions. And the constant refrain is that we don't have enough enforcement to make sure that people, including illegal cannabis growers, are not continuing to divert water illegally from our many watersheds here. And, our local law enforcement, our code enforcement are pretty understaffed, and there seems to be a big hope that the state will provide some help to to prevent all these illegal diversions from going on. And I'm wondering if there's any enforcement mechanism in your proposal to
So what the authorities will do is to allow us to have a better enforcement authority around those. Enforcement is always a pretty big challenge, as you said, around water rights, but it becomes particularly important during drought because of, again, the need to protect human health and safety flows. So I'll say yes, there are additional resources then, and we'll be able to then use those. On that here, but the Water Board will certainly be continuing to communicate, particularly here in this watershed now, given the crisis, what to be expecting.
And if I could have one more quick one. There was some mention of a lot of infrastructure projects to store water, but as we see, there's not a lot of water to store. So are there projects in the pipeline, so to speak, to recycle water and kind of make it happen?
I know that Sonoma County Water Agency has been a real leader, and there's a whole collaborative here in the North Bay, I believe, around water recycling that has been making investments for the last really a decade plus in years. So there's the benefit of those projects here in the region, again, that are contributing, and I believe there are projects certainly in the pipeline. I don't know, I can't enumerate them specifically for you here, but I know our Division of Financial Assistance fields many of those projects and are receiving additional dollars and resources to really focus, again, on drought resiliency and response.
Good afternoon. I'm Carla Namath, the Director of the California Department of Water Resources, and I've been asked to speak briefly on more broadly drought conditions in the state and the condition of the State Water Project. So there's really two things to remember when we head into a statewide drought. One that's been touched upon already is the variability in our hydrologic conditions. So here we are in Mendocino and Sonoma counties where things are very, very acute. If you're in a different part of the state, you probably need to know that this will one day happen to you. So that's to the point of we're all Californians here, and we all need to be doing our part when we have such widespread conditions. The second point is that water that is managed primarily at the local level in California, it means that different parts of the state have different diverse water supply portfolios, which include water from the State Water Project. It includes managing their groundwater basins. It includes extensive recycled water kinds of programs. We also have parts of the state that are now desalinating water. So what tends to happen in a drought when we're looking at drought conditions statewide, it also gets combined with local water supply conditions. And so what we're experiencing here in California now is a statewide low snowpack in the Sierra Nevada. So just a couple weeks ago, we were, I think, at about 73%. We are now at about 30% on average. There are some parts in the southern Sierra that are at 16% of average snowpack. What's happening there is we have these warming temperatures that are accelerating the release of water from the Sierra Nevada, and it's going into the very dry, thirsty ground. All of those things are setting up, I think, difficult conditions if we find ourselves heading into a third dry year in California. In particular, the Feather Watershed, which is where the State Water Project operates, we are now operating that facility to maintain the California Bay Delta. so that that water is not fouled, and even our low allocation of water supply is of high enough quality to help support the 27 million Californians that rely on it. But again, what we want to make sure everyone is doing in California is keep conserving. If you're in an urban area and you've got a lot of investments in local supplies, we want you to be resilient. In a long-term way in terms of drought. And if you are in the Central Valley and you are part of our vibrant agricultural industry here in California, one of the things that we're doing is we're moving water to where it's needed. So as I mentioned, we do have different hydrologies happening in the state. So we have some areas that can transfer water to where it's most needed. And we are using the California Aqueduct to access our groundwater storage to get that water where it's needed. So maybe I'll close with saying we are all in this together. There's no way around it. And part of what is important about today is getting a jump on all the longer term lessons we learned in the previous drought so that we're ready persist. So if there are any questions, I'd be glad to take them, but thank you very much. And thank you to the governor and the secretaries and all of our local leaders here in Mendocino and Sonoma counties. Thank you.
Just follow up and close on 2 points Carla made, which are incredibly important. And it's something